Blockchain is a concept that has taken the world by storm, but still there are lots of questions around the concept itself and its various applications. Also, at a personal level, I wanted to understand more about blockchain, DeFi, which is decentralized finance, and dApps, which are decentralized apps. So I reached out to my senior from engineering college, Sameep Singhania, and invited him to the podcast. Sameep has been working on blockchain for the last 4 years, and in this episode, I dived deep into this whole concept of blockchain with him. I also tried to understand its various applications and the skills one needs to work on to capitalize on this booming demand for jobs in the blockchain ecosystem. If you're also curious about blockchain, then this is exactly what you're looking for. Let's learn. Hi, Sameep. Welcome to Mike and Shorts. So first of all, I'm very excited to have you here because you are my senior from engineering college and glad to have you on the show.
Thanks, Divyansh. Thanks for hosting me today. And yeah, really love talking to you after so many years.
Great. So I'm talking to you majorly because you're doing great stuff on the blockchain front. And I feel that personally, I can learn a lot from you, be it the technology itself or the industry as a whole. And also things about how blockchain is different from what is happening in the crypto world. So crypto is one side of the world, blockchain is the other side of the world, something like that. So clarity on that, I need more clarity on that. So firstly, before deep diving into the episode, I'll just give the audience, people who's gonna listen and watch this podcast, know a little bit about you. So Sameep, you're the co-founder of QuickSwap, which is a cryptocurrency exchange. You work closely with business clients to help them adopt blockchain technology. In short, you are a blockchain enthusiast as well as a developer. Along with that, you're an active keynote speaker at renowned institutions like IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, University of Kuala Lumpur, right? So you're full-time into blockchain and helping students also gain knowledge on that front, helping businesses adopt blockchain. So yeah, I would like you to talk more on this before we talk more about blockchain.
Yeah, of course. Why not? So like, as you said, yeah, I'm truly a blockchain enthusiast and I love this particular technology, like more than anything else, right? So I have been into, this tech industry for more than 10 years now, but I love blockchain the most. So I have worked on backend systems, a lot of server side stuff, but I love the blockchain most, right? Because I think blockchain is not just a technology, right? It's not just a technology, it's the way you interact with each other, right? And like blockchain is going to change all of that. So that's why I don't love the technology, but I love the concept, right? Because technologies can go away, right? Or they can be upgraded, but it's the concept which stays, right? As you can take an example from the internet, right? So internet is not a technology. Internet is a concept which connects people sitting at huge distances. Like internet is our way to connect those people, right? So the concept was great, right? So internet started somewhere in like the early experiment started in 1980s, right? So internet is still there. Technology has evolved. What was there in 1980s, 1990s doesn't exist anymore. We have a very sophisticated technology right now. Similarly, blockchain is going to change the way people interact with each other. They interact with financial institutions. They interact with applications, right? So it's going to change the way. So that's why I love blockchain, like what blockchain is all about. And that's why I'm 100% into blockchain since the day I have learned about blockchain. And I think I started my journey into blockchain somewhere in 2017 when I left my last full-time job. So it was in 2017, and since then I'm in love with blockchain.
That's quite interesting. You talked about the concept of blockchain and the internet. I'll come to that. But before that, I want to know your journey to becoming a blockchain developer or getting into this industry as a whole. What was your journey?
Yeah, of course. It's quite interesting. So as I said, in 2017, I left my full-time job, and then I was looking out for something like what to do next, right? I never wanted to do a job 9 to 6 job once again. So I was looking out for different ways, where I can contribute or what I can do in my life, right? So, and I started doing freelancing at that time. And I was doing a lot of freelancing stuff in Java technology and a lot of, server-side stuff. And then I stumbled upon a project which was related to blockchain. So I was a noob at that time, when it comes to blockchain. But somehow I loved that particular project. So I started working on it, and I started to like gain more knowledge into blockchain industry, into Ethereum ecosystem, into Bitcoin ecosystem, and I just loved it, right? And it was like quite challenging at that time to do something on blockchain because the resources were so scarce. Like not many people like understood blockchain at that particular time. Like there were very few people who understood blockchain, and then there were very few who were able to do some work on blockchain technology, right? So there were not many resources out there which were available as a developer to learn, like what to learn, and that was quite challenging, right? And that's why I loved it as well, right? Because that gave me an opportunity to deep dive, right, into the technology itself, right? So since then, like my journey into blockchain started, like from that particular project, and since that, like I have been doing everything into just blockchain, nothing else. And then I did some more projects, some more freelancing stuff, and then I got into TopTal. Like TopTal is one of the top most freelancing agencies out there, and like very few people are part of TopTal. And I got a chance to work on some of the top-notch blockchain projects like OpenBazaar. It was one of the top most projects at the time. Then on Paraswap, and then on a lot of casino games, a lot of healthcare applications, a lot of like financial applications. And then I realized, that let's do something of our own. And then we made a team and started working on Bootstrap stuff. So basically, that's my journey into blockchain. So for blockchain, like I have been to IIT Delhi for seminars, for lectures, guest lectures in IIT Mumbai. Then I've been to University of Kuala Lumpur as well. And I mean, like doing a lot of stuff like in this particular area.
So when you said you were a noob, I think I still remember that when you were in JSS, our engineering college, you were great at coding at that time. You were my mentor, so I remember that you helped me a lot in terms of my projects, other stuff. So does it make a difference for somebody who is coming from a CS background, computer science background, versus somebody who's coming from a different background, say mechanical or say electronics and communication, to take up blockchain and then progress further in that particular industry? Will it make a difference?
So first of all, thanks for the compliment. Yeah. And I still remember the college days. It was fun. Like, it was actually fun. So So it definitely makes some difference if you have some pre-background into computer science, right? If you know something about data structures, like programming languages, it definitely makes some difference. Yeah, I wouldn't say it doesn't make any difference. But still, if you are from a different industry, you can still get into the blockchain industry. It's that easy, right? So from the developer perspective, developing applications on top of blockchain, if you want to write a smart contracts, is very simple. It's very easy, right? So even if you are not from the IT background or from the CS background, you can still get into it. And I've seen a lot of people doing that. So I know a lot of people, not from India, but from like across the globe, who were not developers, but they're starting develop products on blockchain, right? It's that easy, right? The only thing that you have to take care of, you have to like shift your mindset, right? You don't like, if you are still into the traditional programming like model, and if you want to work that way, that's not going to work in blockchain, right? Because blockchain is a very revolutionary technology. So you need to change your mindset. You need to be very open-minded because things change very rapidly. So you need to learn every day, right? It's not like you learn some technology today and that's going to work for 2 years. No, in blockchain, technology changes every 2 months, every 3 months, every 6 months. Within 6 months, everything has changed. Like what was there 6 months before is no more applicable. Like it's deprecated. So the only thing is you should be open to changes and you should adopt, very frequently. And that's it. If you have that kind of mindset, you can get started in blockchain in a week.
Got it. In fact, I think personally for me, I'm also from a computer science background, but I'm not a developer to say. I'm more into content creation. So I would like to know more on the basics of blockchain. So there are lots of content which talk about blockchain, the basics of blockchain. From your perspective, since you are completely into this development of blockchain in the industry, what is blockchain from a very layman perspective? Just set the basics right for us.
See, everything is in the name. Blockchain simply means chain of blocks, right? That's like what blockchain is all about. So blockchain only consists of different blocks, and every block is associated to each other, right? And that's what blockchain is all about. And each block contains the information, like transactional information. So if you'll ask me, blockchain is nothing. Blockchain is just changing the way people communicate with each other. Like, to give you an example, right now, if you want to transact, like suppose if you want to transfer some money to me, you'll have to do it through a bank, right? So bank is an intermediary there. And what blockchain does is blockchain empowers you to do a peer-to-peer transaction. So instead of going to suppose if you are doing a money value transfer on BTC, you don't have to go to a bank, right? You can simply go to a blockchain network, which is BTC network, and you can directly transfer Bitcoin to me, right? Without any intermediary participation. And that's a big thing actually, because right now, like the entire economy, like everything is run by the intermediaries, and there are a lot of intermediary mafia, right, who runs a lot of big industries and solutions, and that's not actually working for small players, small users, right? Because that has restricted like the reach of money to the people. Like if I'm talking about, let's say somebody sitting in Syria, right, and he wants to do a transfer, he won't be able to do that to me because he has to go to a lot of regulations, a lot of intermediaries, a lot of third parties, and like all of the third parties, they charge some fees, right? So a lot of intermediary fee and stuff is involved. But let's like take an example. If he has access to a blockchain, to BTC, right? Even in sitting in Syria, he can transfer BTC to me without any intermediary, without any charges, right? So that basically changes the way people interact with each other, right? And blockchain is the technology that supports that, right? So the entire concept or the revolution around blockchain is it changes the way users transact with each other, right? Right now, for any transaction, you need an intermediary, not just for banking transaction, but for anything. Let's suppose if you are playing a game, right? You are playing it through, the centralized system, right? You have to like trust the centralized system. But if it's a blockchain game, you don't have to trust anyone. Everything is there on the blockchain and it's decentralized, right? So unless that particular blockchain becomes fraud, your assets are always there. It's like nobody can tamper with it and nobody can simply rub your assets away. So like, in layman terms, that's what blockchain is all about, changing the way users transact with each other.
I have some questions over here. So you said essentially blockchain simplifies transactions, right? It removes the intermediary, right? And you also mentioned peer-to-peer. Essentially peer-to-peer means that there is no intermediary in between. For example, if you and I are doing a transaction, there is nobody between us. But so
right.
For example, I just want to understand it a little better. For example, we have a deal, for say, right? I'm going to pay you 100 rupees. I'm going to lend you 100 rupees and say that I'll earn 10% interest on the money which I lend to you in like 1 year, right? Now, since there is no intermediary in between, there's no central authority, how do I ensure that I get back that money with 10% interest after 1 year? What makes it possible? I think,
cool. Yeah. So see, one thing I would like to say, like, in the early stages of this talk is the technology is still in its very nascent stages, very early stages, I would say, right? So a lot of things are still being researched. A lot of things are still being tested, like how to achieve this, right? The core concept is that we want to achieve this, but at the current technological level, we are not able to achieve everything, right? So the centralization has not been removed 100%. We still need certain centralized party, but a lot, like, but still a good portion of centralization has been removed. But I think in future, everything will be decentralized, right? Even the centralized parties will be involved in the blockchain. So I'm not saying blockchain is here to remove centralization. Like 100%, we need centralization. Like that has been proven in the history of the mankind as well, that 100% decentralization doesn't work. Right? Because if everyone has the power to choose what they want to do, the society is not going to work. Because society needs some kind of rules, right? Society needs some kind of a centralized structure or centralized control mechanism where there is someone to decide whether this is wrong or not, right? Otherwise, society is not going to work. Similarly here as well. But what blockchain is trying to do is it's trying to reduce the level of centralization we have right now. Right? It's not going to remove it 100%. That's not going to work in my personal opinion. Now to answer your question, right? We can actually achieve that right now as well. And there are certain protocols which we call lending protocols like Aave, like Compound, which are out there. Yeah. So what you do in those protocols, you provide some kind of liquidity. Let's suppose I have some USDC with me. I'll provide some USDC over there, right? So it's a smart contract based protocol. What a smart contract is, it's some kind of a programmatic or like code structure which is deployed on top of blockchain, which ensures that you can achieve certain activities over there, and whatever is written in the smart contract will always be followed, because the one of the biggest feature of blockchain is everything is immutable. So once you push something onto the blockchain, you can't change it. So if you have deployed a set of code or a piece of code under the blockchain, you can't change that as well, right? And everything will be governed by the rules over there. So these protocols like Aave, if you have heard about Aave protocol, if you have heard about Compound protocol, these are lending protocols. Yeah, these are lending protocols, and these are governed by a set of smart contracts. And whatever the rule is being set in those smart contracts, those can't be changed, right? So what you can do as a lender is you can go to the protocol, you can provide the money over there, and you can check basically, or you can get it checked if you're not a programmer, that what are the rules of the protocol as per the smart contract, and you can get assured that if you are lending some money out onto the protocol, you will get it back when you want to get it back, right? So basically all these things are already being developed, and there are lending protocols to answer your questions where you can lend your money, you can earn your interest rates, and you can rest assured that this is going to work. It's not going to fail.
So who writes the smart contract? If, for example, Compound is the app which I use for lending, then does the app write the smart contract for me, or do both of us come to a conclusion that this will be the smart contract between us?
So people like me write the smart contracts, right? That's what I do basically, right? So I'm mostly into smart contract development. So what basically happens is, suppose like I am a Compound guy, right? And I am like, let's say I'm a normal guy, and I have an idea that I want to launch a lending protocol, and these will be the rules of the lending protocol, right? I will write a white paper around it, and I'll get it validated, and there will be a lot of discussions around the white paper. And once the white paper is finalized, on the basis of white paper, I will develop my technology. And by developing the technology, I mean, I will write the smart contracts, I will write the supporting interface, I will develop the supporting backend around it, right? So basically, initially, when the protocol starts, the smart contracts are written by the core team who started that particular protocol. So in case of Compound, it was the Compound team. In case of Aave, it was the Aave team. In case of Uniswap, it's the Uniswap team. Right. So basically the core team or the founding team writes the smart contract. They get it audited, right? There are auditors out there. They get it audited by multiple auditors, and then they float the application out there. Now, as a user, it's your choice. You have the white paper, right? You have the open source code. So code is always open source, like in smart contracts. If you find a protocol like whose code is not open source, you should not use it, right? You should only use those protocols whose code is open source and you can see the code, right? And who has audit reports from the good auditors, right? Like this is something which everyone should like definitely take care of if they don't want to get hacked, right? So yeah, so basically the protocol is written, the contracts are developed, they are audited, and then they float the protocol out there and like for the public to use, right? Now it's your choice whether you want to use it or not, right? And then there is a governance around these protocols. So if in future you want to change some of the rules of the protocol, right? So they have something called decentralized governance mechanism, where these protocols launch their tokens. Let's say in Compound, they have a Comp token. Aave, they have a Aave token. In QuickSwap, we have a Quick token, right? So they launch their token and they launch the initial protocol. And now they have a DAO, which is called Decentralized Autonomous Organization, right? So basically there is a governance mechanism out there if you want to change the protocol or some parameters or not, but it's not run by a centralized entity. It's no longer run by the Compound team. It's run by the token holders of Comp. So if I am a Comp token holder and if I want to propose some changes into the protocol, I can propose those changes, right? And all other Comp holders can vote on it. It's more like, a private limited or a public limited company voting. So if I'm a shareholder and if some company wants to promote something or propose something, they propose it and shareholders have the right to vote. And when a minimum quorum is achieved, that particular change happens. The only difference is in this case, everything is decentralized, right? So if I'm a token holder, I have that right. I can either propose, I can accept a proposal, I can reject a proposal. And when a minimum quorum is reached for the acceptance, that particular thing is accepted within the protocol and those changes are made, right? So this is how it works. So it is always started by one team, right? Not by the community. And then there is a DAO associated with it. And like in the future, DAO takes a decision, what will happen to this protocol.
Oh, wow. It's a little complex, but I think the industry is still evolving. So we'll get to learn more about smart contracts as we go further, right? Now, I have this very basic question. Not sure if I should ask it or not, but when you talk about blockchain, the network blockchain, right? You code it somewhere and it is stored somewhere. What is the coding language you use to code blockchain, the network, etc. Is there some coding language you use, or is it something else?
So basically, when you talk about development, there are two tracks of development in blockchain. The first one is the core protocol development, and second one is the application development. So core protocol development is basically when you develop the blockchain in itself, right? So if you are working on a BTC blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain, and you're developing the blockchain itself, then you are the core protocol development. But if you are writing your smart contracts or developing applications on top of Ethereum, then you are a smart contract or dApps developer, like decentralized application developer, right? So there are two tracks to it, right? The one that you are talking about is core protocol development, right? Where you are developing the blockchain itself, right? Now, there is no hard set language or hard set principles which defines a blockchain, right? So every blockchain, like BTC, has its own infrastructure, has its own set of principles or protocols that they follow, and also own set of programming language that they use. Ethereum has its own language. So basically, blockchain doesn't specify which language you have to use, right? So if you talk about Bitcoin, so first of all, we need to understand how blockchain network works, right? So blockchain is nothing; it's just a piece of software, right? So you have so that piece of software is called a node, right? So suppose there's a node. A node is nothing, just a piece of software. You can run it on your computer as well, right? Suppose Divyansh is running a Bitcoin node, Sameep is running a Bitcoin node, and there are like tons of people who are running the Bitcoin node. And all of us who are running this Bitcoin node, they constitute the network, or they create the network, right? So network is not centralized, run by someone, it's run by people like me and you, right? And there are like hundreds of thousands of people running the Bitcoin node, and that makes the Bitcoin network, right? If everyone decides that I want to shut down my piece of BTC node software, the Bitcoin network will be down, right? It will be over. So basically, that's the blockchain network, right? Same for BTC, same for Ethereum as well. In Ethereum as well, people run the node. Like I run the node, you run the node, and like similarly, other people run the node, and that makes the Ethereum ecosystem or Ethereum network. Everyone decides I want to shut down my node, Ethereum ecosystem is gone, right? Now, what is node? Node is a piece of software, right? Like any other software that you run on your computer. Like it's simply that, nothing else, right? Now, so what BTC does or what Ethereum does, they propose a set of protocols, a set of rules that should be followed by a node to be called Ethereum node, right? If to run your Ethereum node, it should specify a certain rules, right? Which the Ethereum community decides. And if your software satisfies those rules, you are actually, and if you're running that particular piece of software, you are actually part of the network. And if it doesn't satisfy, then you are still running the software, but you won't be able to join the network because the network will reject you because you doesn't satisfy all the principles or all the like major points that are required. So basically, effectively, this is like these set of rules, these set of principles is the only thing that a blockchain specifies, like Ethereum specifies. Now on top of that, you can write a software which satisfies all those rules, and you can become the part of network. That's how it works. So there is no specified programming language out there, no specified set of like node out there. You can write if you are a good programmer, you can write your own Ethereum node and join the network. Like you can write your own BTC node, you can join the network, right? There is no specific client that you have to use. But there are some core communities of Bitcoin or Ethereum that run the entire ecosystem, right? They are just part of the ecosystem, right? They are not the ecosystem, they are the part, or they are the core contributors, like as we call them. They don't own the blockchain, but they are the core contributors. And they have some official clients out there or official nodes out there, right? In case of Ethereum, there's an official node which is called Geth. Then there's another official node which is called Parity. So Geth is written in Go language. Parity is written in Rust, right? So there are different clients out there for each blockchain which are written in different languages. There are some JavaScript implementations as well of a node. There are some Java implementations as well, right? And similarly for BTC as well. So even the BTC core community has an official client, but apart from official client, people run their own nodes as well, their own implementations as well. So there is no one language basically which is being used by blockchain. Blockchain is just a set of principles. As I said, it's a concept, right? And you can write your own software which satisfies the concept, and you become the part of the network. That's it.
So you mean that I can write a software code and join the Bitcoin network or Ethereum network from my own laptop as well, right? If I create the node and satisfy the set of rules also. Is that
exactly
possible?
So
wow.
Exactly. So either you can run any of the official node on your computer. If you don't want to write the software itself, you can simply download the software from the internet, from the official website. You can run it. Now you become the part. If you are a developer, if you want to do it yourself, write the software, you can do that, of course. The only condition is you need to satisfy those principles, those rules.
And I've also seen that we usually require a lot of computing power to run these networks, right? Why is that? Why does it require such high computing power? What?
Exactly. Okay, so basically, what happens is, so see, this is a decentralized network, right? Nobody is there to validate anything, right? So suppose if you have 2 BTC and if you are sending that 2 BTC to me, right? So you are sending a transaction to this blockchain network, right? And this blockchain network, entire network validates that Divyansh has this 2 BTC and he has transferred that 2 BTC to Samir, right? And let's suppose in future, after 2 days, you are again trying to sell off your 2 BTC to someone else. So what blockchain network will do is, it will figure out that this is a fraud transaction. Divyansh is trying to do a fraud. This is called double spending. He has already spent his 2 BTC and now is trying to send 2 BTC back to someone else as well, right? So now what happens is, since this is a decentralized network, there is no centralized. This was very easy in a bank, because now in case of bank, if you are transferring, let's suppose $200,000 US to me, so bank will validate whether you have it or not. So you have a trusted entity out there. But in this case, everything is decentralized. As I said, I can run a BTC, my BTC node on my system and start doing the validation part, right? So there needs to be a mechanism so that it ensures that these kind of double spending problems and other fraud doesn't happen on the Bitcoin network or on the Ethereum network, like any public blockchain network, right? So for that to happen, what happens, there is a term called mining, right? There's a term called mining, right? Everyone must have heard about mining, like Bitcoin mining, Ethereum mining. So what does that mean, right? So what happens is, when you broadcast a transaction onto the blockchain network, right? So there are miners sitting, right? They pick up your transaction and they start validating your transaction, right? And they pick up other transactions as well, right? So what happens? They pick up, let's say 100 transactions. They validate those transactions and see whether the transaction is fraud or not, it's okay or not. And then they create a block, right? Then they create a block, and so I'm just going to skip one step, right? So what happens is, they create a block and they publish this block to the network, right? But before publishing, they have to do some kind of puzzle solving, right? And this is for the security. I'll explain it later, but just assume they do some kind of puzzle solving and they associate the answer to that puzzle in that particular block and they send that block to the network. Now there are other miners as well who are doing the same activity. And once they receive this block, they start validating whether this block is good or not, all the transactions contained within this block is good or not, and the puzzle solved by that particular miner is okay or not. If that is okay, they take that particular block and attach it into the blockchain, right? So let's suppose there were 100 blocks. Now they will attach this 101 block to the chain, right? That's why it's called blockchain, right? Because there's a group of, so what happens? The atomic stuff in this blockchain is transaction. Then collection of transaction is block, and collection of block is blockchains, right? And every block is associated with, like the previous block is always associated with the next block, right? And when you associate these two blocks, there is a puzzle between them. You have to solve the puzzle and you have to store the hash of the puzzle within that particular block. Now let's assume there were 100 blocks, right? And there was a transaction within the 90th block, right? 90th block. You had a transaction of 2 BTC with me. Now let's suppose, this is just an assumption, right? You are a fraud, right? And you want to respend that 2 BTC, right? Let's suppose you gave that 2 BTC to me and I provided you my services and now everything, our contract is closed. See, now the blockchain is run by the miner. So what miner can also do is, he can go back to the 90th block, remove that particular transaction from there and put the block over there. He can do that, right? If security is not enough, he can do that, right? So now effectively what he has done is, he has nullified that transaction that happened between me and you, right? So now from the blockchain's history, that particular transaction is gone, right? So now you still have your 2 BTC and I have nothing, and I have provided my services to you. This is a fraud, right? This can happen, right? This can happen, right? So mining prevents this, or the proof of work consensus, which is being used by Ethereum and BTC, does this. Because what happens is, as I said, you have to solve a puzzle, right? And the difficulty of that puzzle is basically, it keeps on increasing as per the network strength, right? So basically that puzzle is, you have to find number of, so that will be too technical if I'll explain that, but you have to find number of zeros in the beginning, and all of the hash and stuff happens. So basically what happens, all the transactions that you have collected in a block, you have to take a hash, then you have to run it through a multiple iterations and figure out number of zeros, right? And you take the hash of previous block as well, right? So there are three important points to this. You take all the transactions within it, right? There are a lot of stuff that you take in the, I'm just pointing out figuring out the main components. You take a train transactions, and you take a previous block hash as well, right? And you compute some formula around it, and you can calculate a solution to the puzzle, right? And that becomes the hash or some kind of proof for the next block, right? So what will happen is, suppose if you change something in the 90th block, right? If you remove the transaction, the hash will change. If the hash will change, the proof of that block will change, right?
Correct.
And the proof of that block is included in the next block.
Next block, yeah.
So that will change as well, right? And after next block, that will change. So basically, after 90th block, every block has to be changed, right?
Correct.
So what that miner now has to do is, he need to have a good enough computing power so that he should be able to change everything after the 90th block, and new blocks are not being formed at that speed, right? So if I'm a miner, and if I have that much power, so that after 90th block, I should be able to change the entire blockchain. Like it should be fast enough so that new blocks are not being created. And like if my blockchain is small enough, it will be thrown out, right? So that's why, and to solve this puzzle, like this puzzle is like very compute intensive puzzle. It's not an easy puzzle like you have to solve some Sudoku, right? It's very like resource intensive. And the difficulty of this puzzle keeps on increasing depending on the network's strength. And this has been done to prevent that kind of frauds happening, right? Because now if the puzzle is hard enough or it's difficult enough, so what that miner has to do, that miner first will have to recompute that puzzle for 90th block, right? And let's assume right now it takes somewhere around 10 minutes in a BTC to mine a block, right? What that 10 minutes mean? The 10 minutes mean basically, at the current network resources, 10 minutes is required to solve a puzzle. That's the difficulty of the puzzle right now. And if the difficulty is reduced to 8 minutes, the BTC blockchain or the BTC block time will become 8 minutes. So basically block time is nothing. It's the time required by the network to solve the puzzle. In case of Ethereum, it's 15 seconds. So if it goes over 15 seconds to 20 seconds for some blocks, the Ethereum network will adjust itself. It will reduce the difficulty so that the average is always 15 seconds. Same in Bitcoin network, right? So let's assume if in 90th block, as a miner, I want to do a fraud. So it will take somewhere around 10 minutes to recalculate that particular block thing. 10 minutes for the next one, 10 minutes for the next one, 10 minutes for the next one. So effectively, it's virtually impossible for me to change something in between and make a blockchain a canonical or a viable blockchain, right?
Okay.
So that's why like proof of work is being used right now, and because of the proof of work being used, a lot of computing power is required. I know it's too much technical, but in nutshell, the answer to is like the proof of work is being used. That's why a lot of mining power is required. And proof of work right now is the only consensus algorithm which is battle tested and is considered fraud resistant. So even in BTC, you must, if you are doing some transactions in BTC, you must have heard that you have to wait for 6 confirmations, right? So if you're doing some transaction to someone, they ask you to wait for 6 confirmations, right? Because it is assumed after 6 confirmation means after my transaction get confirmed, 6 blocks are added in front of it. So if my transaction was confirmed in 100th block, and 6 confirmation means that the vendor assumes my transaction is confirmed after 106 block has been mined, right? So basically there's a gap of 6 blocks because it is assumed that nobody has enough power to invalidate this. Now, no miner can put my transaction out of 100 block and still mine that all the blocks out there in the list 206 or like different and do a fraud, right? So basically 6 blocks or 6 confirmations is considered safe in BTC. Similarly in Ethereum is somewhere around 10, I guess, right? So after 10 confirmations, all the vendors, they assume that nobody can change this transaction now. That's how basically it works. So and it's required as well.
So as the network gets bigger and bigger, the calculation must be getting more complex for the miners to crack. Is that
exactly? So as more computing power is added onto the network, the difficulty keeps on increasing. So the difficulty was very easy somewhere in like 2017 or 2018, right? Even you could do a mining using your normal laptops, right? At that time, people like when BTC started, like the early adopters, they were mining BTC using their normal laptops,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But now there are like huge data centers or data mining rigs out. Like you guys must have heard about data mining rigs,
Correct.
rigs out there, BTC mining rigs, right? So there are like, it's virtually impossible to run a mining node on your laptop right now. Not on a laptop, even on a big server computer as well. You won't be able to do that successfully, right? So there are big mining rigs running, like data mining rigs for Ethereum and BTC running, who like does this mining operations.
So these are dedicated companies who do this mining work, or is it independent people who do it also?
Honestly speaking, right now, like it's mostly like companies out there, like they do it as a business. So like right now, BTC and Ethereum is not as decentralized as it sounds, right? But like, as I said, it's still in its nascent or early stages. Like so the core team or like the Ethereum Foundation or the Bitcoin Foundation, they are working on solving this problem, right? How to make it more centralized, like how to make a BTC or Ethereum mining like feasible using a mobile phone as well. Like I should be able to do it using this phone, right?
Yeah.
Like they are trying to do this. And for that, they have to change the consensus algorithm, right? You can't achieve that on proof of work. So proof of work was good to start with, right? To start the blockchain ecosystem, but it's not good enough to sustain the ecosystem. So that's why like Ethereum ecosystem or the Ethereum team is working very hard to move on to proof of stake. So when proof of stake comes, this computing or the computational resource power would go away, right? Now you don't need any computational resource because now there are no puzzles, right? Right now, everything is like dependent on the puzzle and the computing power is used to solve the puzzles. When you move to proof of stake or other consensus algorithms, like these problems are not there, but they have other problems, right? And that's why like those are not being used right now. Proof of work being used because it is being considered the safest. But Ethereum ecosystem or Ethereum Foundation is trying to move to proof of stake to solve this problem. And once like ETH 2.0 is out there, like complete migration happens to 2.0, proof of stake will be used, and then you can mine the the transactions or the blocks on the blockchain even using your mobile phone, your mobile devices.
Wow.
Or using your Raspberry Pi. So I think that's coming in the future. But right now, like unfortunately, there are like big mining rigs which are run by centralized entities, and they basically run the blockchain right now. And there are very few, like in my opinion, there are very few independent entities who are running this, because even as a user, if I want to run it, I won't be able to do it because it requires a lot of computing resources, right? And I don't have those computing resources or the resources to run those, to have like to procure those computing resources so that I successfully validate a block.
That's quite a deep concept. I think we've just scratched the surface.
Exactly.
So from brief understanding of blockchain, the network, how it functions, mining, proof of work, etc. Can you tell me more about the applications of blockchain? So we've talked about Ethereum, and cryptocurrency is essentially an application of blockchain. Am I correct?
Exactly. So there's a lot of confusion. Like what happens is like people think cryptocurrency is blockchain. No, cryptocurrency is just one of the applications of blockchain, or I would say the first application of blockchain, right? Because BTC was a cryptocurrency, right? And it's the first application of how blockchain can be utilized. Yeah. But there are other applications as well, right? As I said, like a lot of gaming industry is trying to move on to blockchain. So you play a lot of games. You play Call of Duty, you play Game of Thrones and all that stuff, right? So you have in-game assets out there, right? So now what all these companies are trying to do is they're trying to NFTize all these in-game assets and put all those in-game assets onto blockchain. So basically the gaming industry is trying to make sure that they use blockchain for these assets, because right now those assets are not like, they are in the control of centralized entities, and they are basically duplicated as well. Like all those assets out there, like it's not very trustworthy for the games, for the players to play all those games. But once it comes to the blockchain, as a user, you have control to it, because now your assets are on blockchain and you can trust on the security of the blockchain that nobody can snatch it away from you until and unless you give it to someone else or you lose it because of your stupidity, right? So gaming is another one of the biggest use case of this blockchain. Then there's a decentralized finance coming up, where I was talking about lending protocols, like swapping exchange, like exchange protocols and all that stuff. Then there is NFT space as well. By NFT, I mean like as an artist, I should be able to sell I should be able to have my painting exclusively on blockchain, right? So once I do that, it's like I can be assured that it's immutable over there and nobody can duplicate it, because now the NFT industry is supported by blockchain. So NFT basically is non-fungible tokens, and it's specifically for these artists and stuff, like artists, land records and everything. Because right now, if it's not on the blockchain and if it's a centralized industry, like a lot of duplicacy happens, right? You don't have a way to know whether this particular product is a genuine product or not. It's a second copy, first copy, third copy, fourth copy, like which particular copy it is, but it's definitely not an original copy, right? So using a blockchain, like these problems are being solved as well, right? And then there are other like applications coming onto the blockchain as well, like a lot of medical industry is doing a lot of research right now, right? They want to put a medical record on blockchain, right? So that it becomes immutable and only user has access to it. Like they can decide who has access. Right now, if you talk about India, if you go to Fortis or Max, if you did some treatment on Fortis, now if you want to go to Max, like they have no record of it, right? And user has no control over it, right? So a lot of these industries are coming as well. And then a lot of fundraising activities, they are going to happen on blockchain. We have seen that, right, in form of ICOs, right? So like it's very similar to IPO, but fundraising on blockchain. So ICOs was a failure because a lot of projects did scam using ICOs, but ICO is a very cool concept, right? Because in case of IPO, what happens is if you're a company and if you want to get a fundraising and if you launch your share tokens out there, only very few people are able to access it, because if you have a demat account, if you are a registered user and all that stuff, then only you can purchase shares. But if you do a ICO, if you launch your token, if you're doing an ICO, it's called initial coin offerings. Basically, the entire world is open to you, right? If I'm sitting in US, I can do that. Right now, US has some regulations, so they don't allow it. But hypothetically, anybody can, from any part of the world, they can invest in your token, invest in your company, right? And the investment could be as low as 1 rupee, 1 INR, 1 US dollar, like whatever you want to do, right? So there are a lot of use cases like which are there once you talk about blockchain technology. Of course, there are not, like, regulations are still not there, right? So there is a lot of chaos which is happening in different countries, different economies. But I think that's short-lived. Like in very near future, we would see some kind of regulations going there. So once we have a regulation, so it's good to have regulations, I think. Right. Even India is looking towards the crypto regulations, and I'm happy about that, because once you have a regulation, people have a way of doing business around that technology. Right now, we don't have a way to do a business around, because everything is, under the hoods. Nobody knows what's going to happen and like what are the regulations right now. So if we have the regulations, it's good, right? But blockchain technology, I think, has a lot of use cases. Even the use cases which me and you are not able to think right now will come up in the future.
I think from what you just told, you also talked about DeFi, right? Since you're working on something in the DeFi space, right? QuickSwap, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, right? So I read about it, but I want to know from you, what exactly is a cryptocurrency exchange?
Exactly.
Basic terms,
Yeah, of course. So I would term QuickSwap as a asset exchange, right? So you guys must have heard about these foreign exchange platforms, right? So if you go to an airport, if you're traveling to US, you convert your INR converted to US dollar, right? And there are a lot of such exchange, like foreign exchange handlers out there, right? Similarly, QuickSwap is an asset exchange, and in this case, asset is a cryptocurrency. That's the only difference between the foreign exchange and a QuickSwap. No other difference. The foreign exchange is run by centralized entities. QuickSwap is running on a blockchain, and hence it's decentralized, right? So that's the only difference, I would say, right? It's an asset exchange platform, and in this case, the asset is a cryptocurrency. You can convert your ETH to USDC, to WBTC, or like whichever currency you want to do that. And it's basically running on blockchain, so it's decentralized, not controlled by anyone.
And when you exchange crypto, is there a certain fees involved, or is it again not similar to the higher fees which we pay for exchanging, for example, US and INR? You have to pay a premium, right? Is there some kind of premium involved over here as well?
So there's a fee associated with an exchange. See, what happens is in decentralized exchanges, you need liquidity providers, right? Similarly, in foreign exchange as well, right? You need liquidity provider. You need some kind of liquidity, right? If you don't have a USD liquidity, how you are going to convert INR to USD, right?
Correct.
Right. And if you don't give any incentive to liquidity providers, if I am a USD holder, let's suppose I have 100,000 US dollar, right? If I have no incentive, why should I give my 100,000 US dollar to you to convert it to INR, right?
Correct.
So right. So to run a successful business, you definitely need some kind of fees, right? So QuickSwap has a fees. That's true. So QuickSwap has a 0.3% trade fee associated with every trade, right? But that 0.3% fee, out of that 0.3% fee, 0.25% goes to the liquidity provider. So QuickSwap is run by liquidity providers, right? So whatever liquidity you see over there, it's not our liquidity. It's by like different users, right? Even we don't know who has provided liquidity on the exchange, right? And when you make a trade, let's suppose if you are doing a ETH to USDC trade, like whatever the trade value is, let's say $100 US, $1,000 US, 0.3% of that is being deducted as a fee, and 0.25% goes to the liquidity provider, 0.04% goes to a Dragon Slayer, so it's a different product, right, of QuickSwap. So 0.0% goes there, and 0.01% comes to the QuickSwap Foundation. That's how it works. So but the fee is very low. It's 0.3%.
Wow. That's a quick brief of how an exchange works, a crypto exchange works, right? So,
Right.
Sandeep, I know we have talked a lot about blockchain already. So, in your perspective, from your perspective, how is blockchain going to change the world in the near future, or it's already changing the world right now? So, do you have any more perspective on how it's going to change the world in the coming future, or maybe over the past next 100 years?
See, I don't have visibility for next 100 years because, as I said, this industry is changing a lot. Like even in 6 months, a lot can change, right? But what I can say is, I can see, a bridge happening between a centralized industry and a decentralized industry. Right? So a lot of people talk about a war happening between a DeFi and CeFi. Like if I specifically talk about finance, like DeFi is trying to eradicate CeFi. Now that's not going to happen, right? So it's like saying DeFi is going to, kick out banks out of the scenario, out of the scene. No, that's not going to happen. So in my opinion, what's going to happen is that in next couple of years, DeFi and CeFi will merge, basically. So CeFi providers or like CeFi players, they will start using DeFi as a tool to empower the user. Because right now the only problem with CeFi is the user is not that much empowered, right? That's why like the need of Bitcoin was there, because in 2008 there was a crash, and crash happened because of couple of centralized entities, and the entire market went down and people were bankrupt and like everything happened. So the reason was like the users were not empowered enough. There are a lot of centralized entities involved, and that gave birth to blockchain technology to reduce the centralized entities, right? To give users more power, right? So I think in coming years, that's actually going to happen. A merging between a CeFi and DeFi, right? Both of us are going to shake hands and work together, right? So I think blockchain is going to play a major role, and because it's going to empower the users, because it has shown the need for the user empowerment, and I think that is what is going to happen in the future. So blockchain is definitely going to play a major role over there, and like a lot of centralized entities, banks, like markets, like everyone has already started using the blockchain technology. They have started accepting the blockchain technology, right? And I think that's how it's going to work. So in every field, we will see blockchain as a component, whether it's a medical industry, whether it's NFT, whether it's gaming, whether it's casinos, whether it's decentralized finance, like whatever it is, like everywhere you will see a blockchain component, but just a component. I wouldn't say that only blockchain will be used. No, that's not going to happen. Like blockchain is not a solution for everything. Blockchain is a solution to solve just one specific problem, and blockchain will only do that, nothing else.
That's an amazing line which I can quote at the starting. So also one more thing, I read about blockchain. I think the concept came about in 1991, but it was only adopted after the markets crashed in 2008 when Satoshi Nakamoto came up with the concept of BTC, which is Bitcoin. Right. And apart from just the adoption bit, do you think blockchain is going to generate more jobs, and what kind of jobs? If yes, then what kind of jobs will we get to see in the country or in the world?
Right. So as you said, this particular concept of decentralization was there since 90s, right? And a lot of colored coins were out there at that time, but nobody was able to solve this double spend problem that we were discussing earlier, that you sell 2 BTC to me and to someone else. Nobody was effectively able to solve that problem because the technology was not that advanced at that particular time. But Satoshi did that in 2008, and like that was the true origins of blockchain, I would say. So I think, blockchain is going to, create a good job economy out there, because right now you need a lot of developers, blockchain developers, you need blockchain architects, you need someone who understand how to do a marketing around blockchain stuff. You need someone who understands, how to create a product around blockchain, how to include a blockchain component into your business, right? So, and there's an actual need of these resources right now. So if you'll ask me, there are very few developers out there who understand blockchain technology, who actually know how to work on blockchain, who actually know how to develop a smart contract. There are very few. I haven't met more than I can personally say I haven't met more than 5 people in India who understands this technology, who know how to write a smart contract, whom I can trust that they can write a smart contract if I give them something to write, right? I haven't met. Most of the people, they just have done very basics. Either they have written ERC20 contracts, copied it from somewhere else, but there are no true developers out there who actually understand this technology and are able to work on it from day one, right? So I think need is huge. There's a huge gap between demand and supply. Demand is very, very high and supply is 10 times less what is required right now. Like in my personal opinion, even I am looking to hire some developers, but I'm not able to find it since last 6 months, right? A good developers, I would say. Similarly, from the standpoint of blockchain architect who understands how blockchain works and is able to, include your blockchain component into your business, into your application, like those kind of people are not there. Then we need blockchain lawyers, right? Nobody understands. In India, there are very few lawyers who understand how blockchain works and and how a company working in blockchain should deal with it. There are very few people out there who understand this, right? So there's definitely a need, and there's definitely a big gap, right? So in other technologies or in other areas, demand is always less than the supply, right? So if I'm specifically talking about India, right? But in this particular field, demand is much more than supply, at least 10 times more than supply. So if somebody wants to build a career in this field, like, they can definitely do it, and they can do it quickly. As like, if you start working today and if you do some course or do some kind of stuff, like within a month you can make yourself ready to work on blockchain. It's that easy. It's not tough at all.
Exactly my next question. This was my next question, that if somebody wants to learn about blockchain technology, get into development, what are the resources available for somebody to get started at the first place?
So right now there are a lot of resources. Like when I started, there were no resources, but right now you can find a lot of good resources out there. You can go to Udemy. I like Udemy more than any other platform. So I started my journey from there. So you can go to Udemy. There are a lot of short courses, like 14, 15 hours courses. You can get started with it. And so see, the good way of learning a technology is to try it out. So I wouldn't suggest someone to spend days or like months on doing some course and you have a theoretical knowledge, but you don't know how to work practically on that. So so this is how you should start. You should go get a blockchain basic course, right? You can get it from Udemy or you can get it from Coursera. The very blockchain basic course I'm talking about, which will give you a understanding of what blockchain is and like how it works and all that stuff. Then I would suggest for next couple of days, you should, do some kind of Googling out there. Like read a lot about blockchain. Just Google blockchain and read the first 10 links that comes. Then Google mining, Google smart contracts, right? Learn and read the first 10 links out there, right? So next 2 days, you should like just gather all the information from the Google, like as much information as you can. Right? Now, after 2 days, you should go to Udemy or like some other platform, like whichever platform you like find out a course. Like I would specifically say Ethereum development course, like which is 15-20 hours, not more than that. And just do that particular course. You will get the basic understanding of how the smart contracts are being written and like what's the syntax of the language and like the basics of the language. And most of the courses, they give you a project as well, right? So you should be able to do a project by end as well. So when you complete that particular project, it takes somewhere around 7 days, I think, to do a 15-hour course. Because I would suggest like like most of the users, they try to complete 15-hour course in a day. No, that's not fruitful at all. Because if you are doing that, if you're completing a course in 1 or 2 days, you are not doing a course right. You are just running through it. Correct. So you should not spend more than 2 hours or more than 1.5 hours on a course in a day, right? You spend 1.5 hours and then you like whatever you have learned in that course, for next 1.5 hours, you do some Googling around it. So if you have learned a term called a smart contract, if you have learned a term called Solidity, it's a language, right? next 1.5 hour you should spend googling more about what Solidity is. And if you have learned something new in Solidity, you should spend next 1.5 hour learning more about that particular feature, right? This is how you should do, right? So you should spend, in my opinion, 2.5 hour every day, 1.5 hour for the course, and remaining 1 hour for researching about what you have learned today, right? And once you complete that course in 7 days time, now you have a good understanding if you are following this path, because you completed the course and you did a lot of research as well, right? After that, you should figure out an open source project, because in a smart contract, every project is open source, right? There are no projects which are not open source. And if there are projects which are not open source, those are not a worthy project. You should not look at them, right? So you should go to an open source project, like research around some industry. Let's suppose you have more interest in DeFi. Go to DeFi, pick up projects. Let's say you pick up a QuickSwap and try to build something around it, right? Try to, like, okay, so QuickSwap is a decentralized exchange. You can build arbitrage bot around it, right? So everything is, tools are there, smart contracts are there, right? Try and build something on top of that, because now when you do that, you are doing a practical experience. You are working on a real product. You are trying to build something which is already being used by millions of users, right? So that will give you a good experience. And spend 15 days around it, right? Do a lot of research. What is arbitrage? Like, how can I do that? How can I build something on top of QuickSwap, right? Pick up something which is already developed. Let's arbitrage bots are already there, right? Pick up something which is already there. So you don't have to waste your time on the concept. You know the concept. Now you have to use your time on developing the stuff, right? Once you do that, successfully achieve that, now you have a good understanding to work on stuff. And now you can, like, either work as a freelancer or start applying to the companies, or start your own company and product, and who can do that. But once you do that, within this is, I think, 15 to 20 days, or like 4-week cycle, in my opinion. This is a 4-week cycle. So in 4-week cycle, you will have a good understanding how it will work. After 2 weeks, you get a good understanding. But after next 2 weeks, when you do some practical or real world examples, use cases, you get a very good understanding, like how not only how the contracts are written, but how the blockchain works, how the Ethereum ecosystem works, what is a transaction, right? And how it works. You will get understanding of the entire ecosystem, because this is important to understand. It's not just you are able to write a smart contract, you should also understand how the execution happens, because that's where the difference lies. That's where it is actually different from the traditional technologies, right? And you need to understand that, because if you don't understand that, you will write a smart contract, it will have a bug, and that will be exploited. And since it's immutable, you won't be able to do anything. You will just see that it's being exploited. And that's what actually happens in all the exploits out there.
In fact,
so I think this, So this is, I think, the path that someone can follow if you want to be a developer.
Okay. Another point I have is that do we also have mentorships or guidances available when it comes to blockchain? For example, you are an expert, and do you provide guidance or mentorship to students who want to get ahead in the industry? Is there some sort of system, or is it not there? It's still developing.
No, okay. So personally, like, I'm not associated with any such initiatives as of now. But if someone contacts me and if they want to understand how to get started, or they are stuck somewhere, like, they are free to do that. They can contact me on Twitter, they can contact me on LinkedIn, like anywhere, right? If they can contact me on Telegram as well, that's fine. But officially, there are, like, I think Unacademy is running a course, if I'm not wrong. So there are some, like, certain agencies who are doing this, like proper mentorship program, because they have contacted me, like, in the past, to become a mentor, right? And I think even IITs are running programs where they have this mentorship, because I don't remember which particular IIT, but one of the IITs that they like contacted me a few months back to do a mentorship in one such blockchain program. So I'm assuming that all these organizations, like all these companies, they already have this mentorship program for blockchain.
I think the ecosystem is also developing quite a bit in India as well. I think the US has grown a lot in that front. Okay, apart from that, since you're running a blockchain-based startup, my final question to you is, what kind of challenges do you face while running a startup, and that too in India, blockchain startup in India? What are the challenges you are facing right now?
So the biggest challenge that I face right now is there are no regulations around it, right? So see, running a blockchain startup is not a problem in India because blockchain is not crypto. Crypto is just one of the applications of blockchain. So if you are doing something in crypto, that's a problem. But we are running a blockchain startup first of all. But there are still uncertainties around it, because if you are working on blockchain, you are somehow related to crypto as well. Because if you want to develop applications on Ethereum, you need to have Ethereum as well, ETH as well, to deploy your applications. Because to deploy the contracts on Ethereum or to do some transactions, you need ETH to pay the gas fees, right? So there is still some uncertainty associated with it. So like that's the first problem, because we are not like 100% assured of what's going to happen, and like how we can deal with all this stuff. So that's the first problem. But I think that's not the major problem, because we are not in crypto, we are in blockchain space, right? We develop softwares, we don't do it trading platforms, right? Even on QuickSwap level, it's a product, right? It's not like we don't do trading, it's just a product, right? So apart from that, the biggest challenge is resource, as I said. So like, as I said, I'm trying to hire like from last 6 months, and we're not able to figure out like whom to hire, because there are no enough resources out there, right? So that's the biggest challenge. If you want to run a blockchain startup, you you will definitely face difficulty in hiring resources, good resources, right? So that's the second major problem in my opinion. And the third major problem that I face right now is that, like, when you deal with clients, right, they don't really understand what blockchain is, but they want to have blockchain within their ecosystem, within their businesses. So it's very hard to explain to someone that what blockchain is all about, how it can help you, and all that stuff. So these are the like two major challenges. Like, first of all, like the hiring, right? Like, we are not able to hire since last 6 months because we are not able to find someone. Even the recruiting agencies right now, like Naukri.com and Indeed and everyone, they don't have like much blockchain resources, and they are not focused towards blockchain as well, right? So even if you do some kind of contracts with them, then also you will not be able to find it. So like, I'm not sure how to do that, because I haven't been able to like successfully do it in last 6 months. So like, that's the biggest challenge I'm facing right now, because like it's hindering our growth because we are not able to hire.
Also, I think from on the company front, people need more awareness about blockchain, the technology, so that you are better able to communicate with them when you meet them, right? So that
exactly.
ecosystem is not there.
Exactly. Like, colleges are not teaching blockchain. Like, it should be part of curriculum now. Right? It's not the part of curriculum, and like there are no seminars happening in the colleges. Like, it's happening in some of the biggest colleges like IITs, but not in like tier 2 colleges, or not in NITs, all that stuff. So people like the generation, like the coming generation, like the new engineers, they don't know about blockchain, right? They don't know about the traditional technologies, and they want to work on those traditional technologies because nobody is teaching them, right? So like, as you said, there's a lack of awareness as well, right? If like, most of the people, they know about BTC, but when you talk about blockchain, they don't understand what blockchain is, or like possibly they haven't heard of the term blockchain. They have heard of the term Bitcoin. Like, when I talk to people, like they ask me, what do you do? I'm in blockchain. And they look at me, and when I say to them, yeah, it's BT, it's like the technology behind BTC, Bitcoin, then they understand, oh, you do that. Yeah, but I'm not into BTC. I work on the top of the technology. So the lack of awareness is there, and that's why lack of resources is there. But I think that's good as well for anybody who wants to get into this, because this is an opportunity as well.
Correct.
Because this is, as I said, this is an early stage. If you adopt a technology from its very early stages, it's like you are looking at a child who is growing, right? So when he is at his 30s, his 40s, you know that child better than anyone else, because you have seen that particular child since its very early stages, right? It's similar with blockchain. If you adopt blockchain today, after 10 years, you will be one of the pioneers of blockchain.
Wow. It's a great analogy you've given.
Yeah.
So I think, Samir, we've had a very in-depth view of blockchain in this episode. I think we'll need more episodes with you to understand things better. On that note, I think I'll end today's episode. So since we've had quite a big discussion on this, and thank you for joining in. Thank you for providing all the information and the insights. I think the listeners will appreciate your knowledge and information you've provided. And me personally, I've learned a lot from you as well. I'll rerun this recording again and again. To learn more.
Thanks, Divyansh. This was really a good talk, right? So I have been into many interviews before as well, but like, I really enjoyed this one.
Absolutely.
Thanks for inviting me today.
Let's connect sometime in the future, so we'll have more discussions on technology. Yeah,
definitely. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you.
Thank you.